I represent what's called Senate District 55. It doesn't usually mean anything to anybody around here. So I represent the communities of Prior Lake, Shakopee, Jordan, 6 townships. Most people refer to it as Valley Fair, Mystic Lake, and Canterbury. I served 12 years on the Prior Lake School Board before I ran for the Senate. And you know, it's interesting that we're having this discussion because I'll never forget, we opened up our high school in 2003. We passed the referendum in 2000, we broke ground. We put in, I think it was, for some reason, the number of 50 wireless ports in that building. We were high tech, 50. By 2006, when we opened up, when we had gone back in and refurbished it, I think we quadrupled it or something like that. I mean, we added an amazing amount just in 3 years, just for capacity, because as soon as that building opened in 2003, and we'd done the planning in 2000 and 2001, we were already out of capacity the day we opened the doors. And it just goes to show how really, really important it is. Scott County, as part of their economic development, put in a fiber, countywide fiber network around, and allowed government entities, cities, schools, libraries to tap into it for free, and then they charge businesses to come in, but they wanted to make sure they had that broadband infrastructure ready to go from an economic development standpoint. We're fortunate because, you know, we're part of the metro area, and we're growing, and we're building a lot of infrastructure. We're not having to go in and retrofit stuff. We're able to put it in, new, but particularly around the issue of rural broadband. You know, our caucus particularly has been very, very interested in this issue for a long time. We put $20 million into rural broadband in 2017. We passed out an additional $15 million last year. Unfortunately, it was part of the monstrous omnibus bills and got vetoed. But I talked to Senator Gazelka just last week, and part of this jurisdiction is going to be moving under Senator Tori Westrom in the Agricultural Committee, because we really do want to make sure that we have that rural focus. So as you're thinking forward, you want to make sure that you engage with him. I chaired the Education Policy Committee for 2 years and have served on education since joining the Senate. And you know, so when you talk about access to broadband, we're talking about, funny, Denise walks in right when we're talking about kids. There's an aspect to say that, you know, we're going more and more to digital learning, and it's vitally important for kids in rural Minnesota to have access to it. But also, I sat on Senator Scott Jensen's Healthcare Access and Cost Containment Committee, and we talked, essentially came in and talked, and for me it was eye-opening to find out that rural broadband is becoming a life and death service. Not only for physicians, but I was really excited to see the application of mental health. That and you know, an issue that seems to get more and more attention. So, having never served on the committee, but being dropped in as chair, you know, I don't know that I have. I'm meeting with staff now and trying to get my handle on priorities. I have talked with Representative Mahoney, and we're going to, you know, certainly try to do some things with workforce development, but making sure that we have the infrastructure and not forgetting the economic development charge and jurisdiction of my committee is going to be very, very important, and these are issues that I want to make sure get out to the forefront, and that we as the state are appropriately investing in.
Well, Senator, we really appreciate you making some time for us today, and just to come and, you know, kind of, I mean, we're a bit in the limbo land here because we're at our final task force meeting. We hope the next governor is going to appoint a new task force. I suspect there may be some carryover from this task force to it, but there's going to be some changes, I'm sure. And that provides an opportunity for a new discussion about, you know, what's going to be important next in this world? We've really been kind of hyper-focused on the issue of those Minnesotans who don't have connection at the 25 and 3 speed. And we've also been focused on how can what's built be, I particularly don't love this future-proof term because I don't know that anything is nowadays, but it means it's scalable up to a place that I think people really see as, kind of super high-speed internet and more focused on that economic development side of it. I mean, I think that Landon would tell you that in their research, that is really an important portion of rural communities and rural residents being able to more fully participate in our modern economy. And hearing Diane talk about climbing that grain bin, one of the things that we tried to do in the task force, we did a little less last year, but through the years go out and visit communities to be able to see how either the lack of connection was affecting them, or when they had high-speed connection, how it was changing their community to be able to participate. I also think it's interesting, I heard this a little bit, I don't know if anyone else heard it on the radio this morning, about the University of Minnesota doing this sort of like a science grand challenge type idea debate around topics where it's multi-discipline, bringing it in. It's really led by the School of Engineering, but they're gonna have a verdict, I think later this month or next month, on one-to-one device usage in schools, what best practice should be. And I thought that some members of the task force might be very interested in that, because that's one of the big issues, right? Is how you are all investing in the state side of the school districts to be able to achieve connectivity. But things that folks want to bring up or share at this point. It's interesting to hear that the Agriculture Committee will get maybe a little more of this as attention. So.
Margaret, it's hard to be in any meeting where we don't at least talk a little bit about the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
And I think we'd probably be amiss if we didn't, really, very amiss if we didn't. But one of the telehealth programs that's fast growing at Essentia is a program where the pharmacists meet with people who are addicted to the prescription opioids, and they taper the patient down 10% dosage each 2 weeks, and they work in tandem with the family practice provider who's referred the patient, and the patient is free. And that program is very fast growing, and we're having such wonderful success. Over the years, I know I was at this meeting saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And, now it's actually happening. And people are getting their lives back. It doesn't take 2 months, it might take 5. But it's a very good example of how high-speed internet is really, we need it. And it's part of what you were saying, the applications are just fascinating and fast coming. I think the other thing that we're going to be seeing a lot of growth in is direct to the consumer, keeping people in their homes, doing more home monitoring of their diseases, and also bring their appointments right to their bedside or their home. So we'll be seeing just huge growth in that, I think, over the next 3 to 5 years. So hang on to our hats.
Well, Senator, I just got the message, the breaking alert from the Star Tribune. You might know this already, but the surplus is $1.54 billion. So, obviously that's.
Let me guess where this question's going.
Well, I'm not actually going to ask you that. We would only make the pitch that one of the things that we have said over the years is that because the way this program has been established as a public-private partnership with the private entities, whether it's a co-op or a private provider owning the equipment, the beauty of this is being able to take one-time dollars and put it into the program to leverage those private dollars. And the state doesn't have those sort of tails issues for one-time monies, which become a huge deal in the budget. So that seems like a pretty good situation to be in. We'll see if that holds into February, but that's
Well, it actually ties into a question I was gonna ask,
Yeah.
right? And that is, we put in 20,
Yeah.
we proposed to put in 15, and it feels like we're kind of meeting out funding a little bit. Do we have an idea of, if we were to use some of the surplus,
yes.
right? Now, part of that's gotta go to tax conformity. That's part of the reason why we
Right.
have the surplus as big as it is, because Minnesotans will be paying in
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
But, give me, I mean,
Yeah.
is there a number?
Yes.
Is there a target that?
Page
and I-
12.
in your report.
So
But I'm a senator,
but-
I have people
no,
read this for me.
No, page 12, it's pretty straightforward.
I'm
I mean,
just kidding.
basically, basically, and I will say that John has been super helpful in this process over the years of both helping us draft these reports and helping us work through what we believe is as accurate a map as we can get. And that's because we are accounting in this issue for some of the other funding sources that Diane mentioned, like the Connect America Fund coming into the state from the federal dollars. We're looking at how companies do keep investing on their own as well. But when you talk about the 25 and 3 and the unconnected, this number of right under $70 million per biennium through, I think, three cycles gets everybody connected. So
roughly $210 million.
yeah, and one of the reasons that we're always a little bit careful about that is obviously there could be some more federal money coming into this at some point. It has been a priority of the Trump administration to look at connecting across the country. But we're pretty solid on this little under 70 million for a first biennial number, and then it'll need constant updating is the thing. That's one of the things that's one of the beauties of both the Office of Broadband and a task force working together is to try to continue to update that number for all of you.
Can I just make a point of
Yeah.
clarification? So the numbers are based off of trying to achieve our state in 2022
Yes.
speed goals, so we have 3 years to do that. And so the recommendation essentially is just under $35 million a year for the next 3 years.
Mhm.
So that's the $70 million for the biennium, plus an additional $35 million in the
When we say 3 cycles, we're talking 3 biennial budget
Yes.
cycles, so it is $200 million.
No.
Oh, sorry, okay.
3
Fiscal years.
3 fiscal
fiscal
years.
3 fiscal years,
Yeah.
so,
Less.
yeah.
We cut it in
So only $100 million.
Thank you so much for being here, Senator. The one thing I would add, and for your interest in the report, is that another change that the task force has recommended is that the funding be put into the base budget.
Yeah.
So that's important from a long-term planning perspective, and you can appreciate the work in the communities and the providers to prepare a project. And you need a level of confidence to be able to invest in that process, and so base funding would really help communities and providers across the state use the funds more effectively. So that's another.
Can I do a caveat on that? I think there's 2 parts of base funding. One is the Office of Broadband has never had base funding. And so that is, I think, the largest need is to make sure that they get into the base budget so that there's some continuity of service there. The issue with doing one-time funds, of course, that becomes, when you have a surplus, that becomes a different deal. But you could do a sunset on after a period of time on the funds. So I want to be careful about that. We're not advocating that has to continue to go on forever and ever. But I do think that the issue is the Office of Broadband really needing to have that stability. And frankly, the state is benefited by that. I will say this, since she's not here, Dana is an expert in this field. She is asked to share her knowledge all around the country. I don't think Dana McKenzie wants to leave Minnesota, but you guys need to make sure she doesn't. So that's.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to point out with John's numbers is those numbers are to hit the unserved areas, so that's making sure there's no duplication or overlap with existing infrastructure. And the other piece of that is that the numbers are based on a 50-50 match.
Right.
And when we get out into some of these more remote and sparsely populated areas, the 50-50 match may not work, and you may not find folks willing to make an investment because they can't make it go at 50-50.
And that's one of those things that I think we realize now today needs to be revisited in this program is, is there some measure of need that can be documented that says, actually there needs to be more in as a reimbursement from the state to really serve people. And now we're starting to talk about the hardest places to reach and get to. We also have, is the one-page sheet, which has all and that's a separate, I don't know if someone could pass that down to the center. Okay, great. It does address some of the other issues important in this space, the funding issue, the issue of broadband office, the issue of cybersecurity, which I know the caucus is familiar with. We do think it is important for people to be able to feel confident in the services of state government, and that helps with adoption out there. And then being concerned about the workforce of the future in that area is something we think about as well. And then things like big ones to make sure departments are coordinating across, particularly the transportation department is the largest one there, where we can work together, but Met Council can play a role in that and others. And then we have our education funding issues, education and libraries. We see that as key. I mean, if you don't have good service and high-speed service in your school, there's a lot you can't do. But when you leave that school, and if you don't have the good service at home, the library often becomes the place of community for getting that connection. We've tried to be strategic and thoughtful about these, and we have a lot that we could say about. There is a lot in here about other technologies going forward, what the future is. We actually, on the task force, the task force, have a fixed wireless provider who's done a lot of work in the southwestern and central part of the state. I asked if Judy wanted to speak. Judy has a satellite client, and satellite can play a role in the whole mix of technologies. So we want to make sure that folks have the information they need to go forward in this area.
Well, and that touches on, as I get ramped up in this issue, touches on a very, one of the key pieces that I would like to understand better, and that is, what is the role of new delivery services? It's not all Ethernet cable. It can be satellite, it can be 5G, it can be a lot of different technologies where you can have big infrastructures capable of serving those hard to reach places that you were talking about, sparsely, and that's something, and as well as kind of understanding, if there's a short-term need, let's say there's a 3-year need of $100 million, what is, and before the meeting we talked about it. Sure, we've got an urgent need in rural access, but we're going to continue to have, we're going to continue to need to focus on this business of internet going forward. Even it kind of reminds me of the regulatory compact that we got into with the electric companies, and in order to electrify the state, well, we're there, and now do we need that that same focus here to connect our folks to the web you know, as more and more businesses start to allow their employees to come telecommute, as we start to deliver health services, as we start to teach our kids and give them access to things like Khan Academy and other, you know, we've got our community colleges, you know, starting to reach rural areas and do, so now you've got people in, that might be 100 miles away from a community college able to take a class without having, you know, and still be able to make dinner for the kids and do what they need to do. So it's really, it's an exciting area, and I'd kind of like to understand the short and the long term. So if we look at 100 million as the short term, then what's the need in the long term?
Right. No, do you wanna?
You can answer.
I mean, I don't know that I have an exact answer for
Yeah.
that, but I do think that that's where continuing the Office of Broadband, who's doing that sort of scanning work to see and keeping up with the, you know, the broad range of industry developments. We have been so focused because of the way the governor's order speaks to, you know, a plan to connect all Minnesotans to high-speed broadband. I think that you are right, though, that there's going to, it is one of those things that sort of was my aha about a year into it, like, oh, it's never going to end. I mean, it's not a like we get to a finite point and everybody goes, woo, let's have a celebration, we're done. It really is that, you know, speeds are gonna continue to change. You know, Moore's law says that things will keep going. Now, there's some debate about whether technology is gonna continue that fast into the future, but there's gonna be new uses for it that I think are gonna put demands on the system, the connected vehicles, the issues with connected farms that we've seen. You know, there's all sorts of things happening here that go far out into what we can see today. And so there probably is some sort of need that is going to sit there even after we hit the everybody's connected at a baseline speed in the state. I'm gonna go to Neil and then.
And that, I'll just build onto that, and I'm sorry that I walked in late to your beginning comments, but talking about the economic development side of it, I'm with a nonprofit, Reverend Ignite, and we're now launching Ignite Minnesota as a statewide hub for US Ignite, the National Science Foundation, to design a model to keep greater Minnesota and rural America, really for them, competitive, economically competitive. And in the base of it is broadband, but I don't think there's been enough attention done to, once communities have broadband, how we use it as an economic driver. The Blanding Foundation has had a vision and has put dollars behind that to help communities like ours and regions like ours build on the broadband for you know, workforce development, such and innovation and other things. But I would see that as another statewide need. Right now things are very siloed, and there is not a place for what, even in the metro I would say, but especially in greater Minnesota, to be able to bring those key sectors together to drive change for the economy. We talk about government, academia, corporate, community. And so to really see now the next step with this, those that do have broadband, how to really use that as a driver to change the economy, to change those, develop those applications and help our students and help our hospitals really use it and leverage that.
Well, and as I mentioned early on, we've seen that in Scott County where what was 12 years ago or whatever it was, we put in the fiber network. The county invested in it, and boy, it was not all that popular with a lot of residents at the time, but it's proven out that, you know, as one of the fastest growing counties in the country, we're seeing job growth explode in Scott County. I've got 1,000 new homes going up in my district right now, just in Prior Lake. Plus another several hundred acres that are up for sale. And I know one plot of land, somebody's looking to put 500 new homes just in that one plot of land. So it's you know, I think when you look back over time, it was a wise investment for the county to be able to do that.
Definitely. And I was just, and I see that growth in the metro, but we also in greater Minnesota want to stay competitive and not have, you know, be able to thrive in all of Minnesota and not have to be, you know, be able to live where we want to live. And so just to stress that for greater Minnesota also.
Here's the good news. the prediction for how many people we need to keep this state growing and running means we have to net import into the state about 11,000 people a year. So we should see it less as a competition between where people are living and more about an attraction issue about where we need to attract people in. So I think that it's an important point because rural communities want to stay vibrant, but the other part of this is we are going to need overall a higher level of growth of people coming into the state to keep the state's economic viability in the long run.
Senator, the bill I wanted to ring, it's really fun to hear Neela talk. You may be aware Neela runs the Red Wing Ignite, which is a really unique and impressive, influential economic development agency that tries to promote broadband as an engine of economic vitality. She's talking about the high end of digital literacy. I wanted to call out as an important role for the state. You asked how much is enough. The lower end of the whole digital divide challenge. Yeah. And Hannah's here, a librarian. She knows that too. That we really need, the state needs to pay attention to people have the skills they need to use the internet.
And that's rural and urban.
And that's rural and urban. And as that divide continues to grow, it really threatens Minnesota, it threatens the quality of life, it threatens equal opportunity for people. And in our task force report, you'll find a recommendation in addition to funding the Office of Broadband-based funding and the grant program, a recognition of the need for investment in digital literacy efforts that will ensure that Minnesotans, all Minnesotans, regardless of their zip code, have the skills they need to use the internet. You can't apply to McDonald's without a device, a connection, and the skills you use. So it's that whole digital equity piece is really important, and I thank you for your leadership. I encourage you to be aware of that component as well as access.
Senator Pratt needs to leave in just a moment. I'm going to let Don have the last word here.
Thanks very much for your interest in being here today. Just a couple comments. One, on trying to get a grasp around the technologies, one of the things that we've learned over the years is that almost without exception, a fiber backbone is necessary to each of the technologies that you mentioned. Yep. And so it is very important that that get deployed throughout the state of Minnesota. Secondly, in my perspective as someone from rural Minnesota, I've really appreciated the Office of Broadband Development and the work they've done and the work they've done in the grants, seeing that administered efficiently. One of the tours we had was down to Rock County, and it's kind of too bad Jody isn't here today, but he could give you examples of new employers and new businesses coming into Rock County as a result of their county-wide deployment of broadband. And then I was listening to the same radio station that Margaret was, and a couple other things I picked up on. There's a book that you may want to read that just came out. It's called Digitalization and the American Workforce. It's
or
a brand new
staff
book.
read it and summarize it.
Yeah. I'll give you the staff memo, but it sounded very interesting, something that I wanted to read. And then apparently this week, Microsoft issued a report on the digital divide between rural and urban. That might also be.
We have a request to get that report, which I don't think we got yesterday, but I put a request into Microsoft because I couldn't get the full report without requesting it. So we're trying to get that so that, I mean, even though the task force is technically towards its end, I want to share that with all of you. So.
So let me leave you with this, and Denise has heard this from education, and Margaret's probably lived it. So I'm just going to be, what you're going to find from me is sometimes I'm overly honest. So you don't have to pass the test to be a legislator, so we're not that smart. So as you find these problems, I'm looking for solutions. So for instance, when we talk about, when I listen to this ETC issue, is there something we can do statutorily in order to help you access the funding that you need? You know, my job is to remove, you know, I've been a senior manager. I just recently left US Bank as a senior vice president, but I've been a senior manager for a long time, and what I found is that many times my role is just to remove roadblocks so that people can get good work done. And so, you know, I'm here to listen to, you know, in any way that I can to help you remove some of the barriers to to achieving your goal if there's a place that we can do that. And if it's, I'm sure there's gonna be, you know, nothing comes without controversy, but like I say, you know, sometimes it's don't just tell me the problem, but help me understand where you wanna go with the solution. And I'm just very, very pointed like that, and we're gonna get some good things done in education this year. I'd like to get some great things done, utilizing kind of the rather than a top-down approach to solving problems, more of a bottom-up, relying on the experts who've really spent the time looking at it. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for making the time for us today. We really appreciate it, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.
Yes, thanks.
Nathan, you ready?
Sure am.
All right, Nathan is going to speak to the Rural Broadband Coalition, which, okay, and there's a letter which is attached.
Yes.
Our seats
You
now.
should have.
I don't have it. I don't know why I don't have it, but I didn't have it. Okay, great.
I
There we go.
promise I'll be very brief. I, along with Judy Erickson, who many of you know, represent the Rural Broadband Coalition, and we wanted to simply say thank you to the task force for your dedication and leadership on broadband issues over the last several years. Looking to the letter that you have, just want to outline a few of the priorities that we have, which in many ways mirror the priorities of the task force. Base funding for the border-to-border grant program, which according to the math that you provided, I think is about $209 million over the next 3 years. And we are looking for some kind of base funding for that. We also would support base funding for the Office of Broadband Development. We think that's very important, as you guys were talking about earlier, as well as a continuation of the Broadband Task Force. We are here to help you in any way that we can.
Well, good. I'm glad that, first of all, thank you for your work. I'm glad that the Rural Broadband Coalition exists, and it will give some continuity to the issue as things are going forward here. I think that it's really important that you're advocating to the governor-elect about these issues. And we do know that he spoke to them on the campaign trail several times, and so that is a hopeful thing. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What we thought we would do next, leading up to Chief of Staff Doran Feld coming, is just do a little recap of what people are proud of in the work that we've done, what you're thinking about as we come to this close. It's good to mark moments too. I don't think we should do super long speeches or anything there. Judy's running from the room already. But you know, a few moments for everyone to reflect on this experience of the Broadband Task Force and the work that's being done. That would be great. I think cold calling someone would not be really fair, so I'm gonna look for somewhere to start on this. All right, Denise, then we're gonna move that way, so you know what that means. Okay.
Okay, as I reflect on the work of this task force before me and while I was here, I think one of the accomplishments that people don't have as clear as an understanding, because you guys are all in different arenas and I'm in the world of education, but I think one of the milestones that doesn't get as much attention is that the Office of Broadband has now taken on the responsibility of monitoring education and where are our school districts at, and are they prepared for the future, and then forging that relationship with Education Superhighway and trying to form a coalition statewide, because if you recall when we were first done this, there was nobody to ask in the state of Minnesota, where are our schools? What is the state of technology in our schools? And so actually this, and of course, this also speaks to the giftedness of Dana, is that she walks that line so beautifully of not stepping on other people's toes, taking power away, and has an incredible amount of patience, way more than me. And so just moving that forward, but then immediately coming up and being at the NSDA roundtables, just talking to superintendents, that soft aggression on assertiveness and understanding where she's going and what she's doing. So the relationship with I think that this group helped empower that work as well, and so I think it was probably a mutual work, but I think that's great. And then the other piece that in the world of education is what Senator Pratt was just talking about today, and I could have and should have probably interjected that we have Maureen as an expert and was actually quoted in the Star Tribune on telemedicine, I think it was yesterday. And the potential for telemedicine for serving mental health issues in schools for students is really going to be big, and having all of that work done and an expert right here at this table of us to bounce off of, and I did do that when Senator Rosen was going to have a bill on telemedicine, telemental health in our schools. Called Maureen, she answered her phone, which is like a miracle in these days, and gave the exact information that we needed to do to put on a one-pager for Senator Rosen, and she just said, look at this beautiful handout. You know, this just, articulates very well what we're trying to do and trying to move in that direction. So, it's a little more complicated maybe than what you want, but just the networking, the level of expertise, and then the now inclusion of education in this whole broadband initiative is good for our schools. So thank you.
I get a lot of calls from my colleagues around the country. I guess imitation is the highest form of flattery. A lot of them are like, hey, what's going on in Minnesota? You can well imagine AT&T, we're a little paranoid about government-sponsored funding projects that, get into the telecom world. Like, my first reaction is slow down. This is appropriated by the legislature. It's a grant program. I kind of walk them through it, and I said, look, we've done a tremendous job of allocating those dollars to projects and partners where there is a need, and we can stand in front of the legislature and stakeholders and be very proud of that. And we're starting to see that Indiana and the governor of Illinois is talking about a program. I mean, these states are building. We got to keep Dana because she's going to start, her own firm and go all around the country. I mean, if she can do that,
She's not here to have that.
she can double her salary. I'm telling you. So that's been a real pleasure to kind of be part of that. I think also a tremendous role that this task force has served over the last 5 years. When I first got here, I would say that the legislative knowledge of broadband and telecommunications, the bench wasn't very deep, let's just say. No disrespect to our senator who was just here or any of his colleagues, but it wasn't very deep. And I think we through the task force, through reports, through Dana's work, legislators want to know what's going on in their communities on broadband. They want to know what's going on in telecommunications, investment. We've had a lot of different discussions. I don't think this task force, I don't think we could have gotten a small cell bill done had it not been for kind of a task force, talking about the many changes involved in telecommunications. So I think it's been a real pleasure over the last 5 years.
All right, hi. Yeah, I think this is, I've not had the history that Paul has had with the task force. I've only been more of the newcomers, but I've really appreciated the learning I've had from each of you, personally, professionally, about your roles and your day job, and so it's been very educational for me, and learn more about how the state works and how things get done in the Capitol right in front of us here. So it's been a really good learning process for me. I think, as you all know, I've come from a little bit of a different perspective, a different framing than many of you around the table. I think just like Denise and Maureen, my business is not broadband. I am not a provider of broadband, and I've been also very blessed to have broadband in our community. And so I think my impatience at times is more like, to see that all of this overlaps, the cybersecurity, that telehealth, education, it's not in the silos. So the model that we're trying to really work on in greater Minnesota is trying to figure out how to convene and make those discussions all on one platform, right? And not be so siloed, whether it be funding or conversation or business development or workforce or schools, and really trying to bring all those key players together. And so I think broadband in this important role is, you know, keeping everyone on the same playing field for Minnesota, and it's the start. But I guess I just urge, whether it be state funding or whether it be partnerships with some of the organizations around the table or individuals around the table, of how we can continue this dialogue moving forward on how to elevate, once you have broadband, all the tools that you need in a community or a region or a state. I would love to work with any of you outside of the broadband task force for that. I think it's a really important thing. But I really enjoyed, and I think we've been able to have some interesting conversations, and it's neat to see the progress and the dollars that have been given to a really important topic. So thank you.
First, I want to say that this has been an amazing group. Been part of this, and I'm old enough to have been involved in lots and lots of groups and ideas, and all groups start out with great ideas, and most of the time they have trouble executing. And this group has been really amazing. You look at the stuff that we've done, establish an Office of Broadband, and it's now nationally recognized. I'm on the National Cable Television Association board, and one of the questions I always get is, what are they doing in Minnesota right now? Bring us up to date on what's going on in Minnesota. You know, so on a national level, it's recognized by the FCC even, you know, comments about what we're doing here. So this is good, and you know, we established that. We put together a grant program. We got several rounds of funding for that, and as we're finding, we received a couple of grants, and as we're finding, you build something, and it's not just a static thing. Other people move into those areas where you have built those plants in rural areas because it's there, and they'll buy a little piece of land and they'll build a house in that little woods or field or whatever it is, because they can get that service. And it's transformational for the rural areas. It allows people to stay there. Just as a quick aside, one of the reasons that we got into doing internet way back, and we've been in it over 20 years now, was that I looked around and it seemed like everybody who was an exceptional person was leaving the area, moving to the Twin Cities, moving to Chicago, moving to Dallas, whatever. And we have, you know, in these rural towns in Minnesota, we have tremendous work ethics. We have smart people, and they just get siphoned away because they don't feel that they have the ability to get everything. We were having this discussion the other day, that what is it in Thief River Falls that you're missing, that that you have to live in Chicago? Well, right now with the internet and everything, you can do everything. You can get, you know, high quality medical care. You can buy anything. And about the only thing you're missing in Chicago is getting shot at.
Or traffic, yeah.
I think a lot of traffic too. Yes, my son makes the comment that he has a one song commute.
A one song.
One song commute to work. So, but I just think we have done so much with on the table that we've really been able to get money to fund all our good ideas. But the next thing, you know, our work isn't done, and the next thing we need to do is to start really focusing, and I think this will be, if a new task force is formed and stuff, the focus is gonna be cybersecurity, because it's getting to be a bigger and bigger and bigger issue in every area, whether it's commerce, medical care, anything that you look at, there's a scam going on. I was just reading Kipler's tax letter this morning, and they said, anything that you get from the IRS, look at it twice, because the scammers are so good. And it's just, So that, I mean, that's the next frontier that we've got, and that's the next thing we're gonna have to look at a lot. That's my 2 cents for it.
We're gonna come back to John and Diane, and I'm passing to this.
There you go.
That's the privilege of leadership.
So when I think about everything we did, I look around the table and I think about how diverse we are from our perspectives about broadband and how many different things we bring to the table and how we didn't always agree. I mean, we had some pretty animated discussions about not just what should our recommendations be, but what priority we want to give them and how we want to take the next step. I could not be prouder of the reports that we put out because it's more than just, well, here's the issue without any solution or any plan to get there. I just think that what we've been able to produce and leave as a legacy by way of reports and the reputation that the task force has as a whole, I mean, I think industry-wide, from education to health to economic development, whether you're a provider or a nonprofit, people have a universally good impression and opinion of the task force, that we've walked that line and balanced all of these diverse interests to push forward the greater interest of Minnesota. And I do think that's a tribute to leadership though too, so I would want to say thank you to Margaret and everybody who has stepped up, because none of us could have done it unless we all rode together and did all of this incredible amount of work, which does underscore how much does remain to be done. I mean, it's good to take a pause and reflect on how much has been done, and then think about how much more we have to do, and how much good we can do in this environment and in this forum.
I was gonna say most of what Shannon just said. It's a remarkable group of people to get so many different perspectives from so many different backgrounds and all contributing to what we've been able to achieve here. And that's really been enjoyable and rewarding, and we should all be very, very proud of it. The accomplishments that we have, most of them have already been noted. The one that I'll raise and Nona's raised is the goals that we set that were embodied in the legislation for the speed goals. And that was one of the more difficult discussions we had while I've been on the task force. And I remember setting one of the broader goals and trying to do, well, what should be that upload goal? And should it be 20? Should it be 30? Should it be 40? And ultimately reached a resolution that we were all able to live with. And during the course of a group with this, no minority reports or anything like that. And that's very remarkable. And then living in Wadena, seeing the actual benefits and the deployment of this infrastructure is just incredible. Around Wadena, we've had fiber being deployed, and seeing people have the types of service. And even this summer, I connected my cabin to Paul Bunyan, the internet, and now have 200, whereas my office has 10.3. And so I know where I'll be next summer.
Yeah, you'll be working in the cabin.
And then the work product. One thing I've really enjoyed is the writing exercise, the subcommittees, all of the input, and then being able to put that together, and then being able to delegate it to John, who has done such a remarkable, fantastic job for us to take all of those pieces and then end up with a work product like this that is so seamless and unified. Very much respect and appreciate that work. And then Margaret, of course, your leadership too has been phenomenal, so thank you very much.
Well, the 4 of us on this side of the table have a hard job because you guys have done such a nice job. Sorry about that. I would say ditto to Donald, that Shannon and John shared a lot of my sentiments. I've been really proud to be on the task force. It's been an honor. I'm proud of Minnesota. I'm proud of our state. I think that this does set a wonderful example of how different people with different perspectives and backgrounds and histories can work together collaboratively, and I've appreciated that exercise. From the constituents that I represent, just think how much better we are off in Minnesota today. I'm not sure how much the task force can really take, but we're part of a model, as we kind of call it. And I think we played an important part in that model that, as you said, increased confidence in the integrity of the process. So I've appreciated that. And I've appreciated the staff work as somebody that cares about process. I know that Diane and John have worked very hard to help us be as productive as ever, and I wanted to just shout out things of admiration and appreciation for you guys. And Margaret, to you.
So, don't take this the wrong way, but this has probably been one of the weirdest, like, professional experiences of my very short career.
Okay, we like weird. Tell us more.
Weird in a good way, though. Librarians tend to be very insular, you know, and keep to their little ponds. So to be plucked out of that world and dropped into this one, knowing very little, admittedly, about broadband, and still feeling like I have plenty to learn, has just been such a privilege, really. I think when I first joined this, I had moved into an apartment for like the first time living in Minnesota recently, and like couldn't afford internet yet. So it was like just so different. Thinking about the work that the Office of Broadband Development does, I am so happy to see state library services included in that work. I've been doing some work with the American Library Association, and their policy experts have been asking questions about what's going on in Minnesota. Do you know anything about that? To which I say, not really, I'm just like at the table. But I do try to explain.
Way to undersell
that. When thinking about work that needs to be done, though, I think affordability is an area that stands out strongly to me, having shared that I didn't have internet when I started on this because I could not afford it. And I know libraries play a huge role in providing access to people who can't afford access, but library hours are 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. if you're at one of the big ones in downtown Minneapolis. Otherwise, it could just be 20 hours a week, and that's not enough.
Thank you for bringing that up.
I too wanted to say a few thank yous to John and Diane for everything they've done. And I think Joanna's not here yet, but even Joanna was staff to us in the early days, if my memory is correct. So thank you to all of those folks for the work they did. And thank you to Margaret for the leadership. I mean, you've been here every month for the last 8 years, I think, almost unfailingly. And given the load of leading an organization the size of the High Tech Association, I think your commitment to the process was very impressive. So thank you very much for doing that. You know, I have CenturyLink on my name badge, but I'm also a member of the Minnesota Telecom Alliance. I work with a number of companies within the organization, and I think that we believe as an association that one of the best things about what's come out in the last several years is the creation of the Office of Broadband. Our members really enjoy working with Diane and the team over there. They do a great job advocating on behalf of members when they can, and they do a great job of just listening and hearing what our concerns are. So thank you again for all of that. I think Shannon's comment about state reputation was something I jotted down because I think that's really important as a takeaway for the task force and for legislators as they look at our broadband grant program. I recently took on an expanded role at the company and I'm getting involved in some other states, including the state of Michigan. And the first legislative update I got on Michigan was that they're creating a broadband grant program based on Minnesota.
Wow.
And like Paul, I hear from my colleagues in other states about the Minnesota program. What the heck did you guys do up there? So as we walk them through what the program is and what it does, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it's well beyond Michigan. It's into a number of other states. And finally, I just think the comments I've heard today directed to Senator Pratt and the comments around the table, and comments from the Rural Broadband Coalition really lead me to believe that if we work together, we can accomplish some really meaningful progress in getting broadband expanded in Minnesota. So hopefully we can take the good that's coming out of, good energy coming out of today, and working together we can secure significant money for a broadband grant program. Thank you.
Yeah, well, even though I'm a registered nurse, I just love to take care of people, especially when they're sick. I also like to teach. And, you know, I think it has been such a great opportunity for me to, you know, have an audience to teach about health and technology and intersections, and just the great synergies that have occurred in the last, you know, 8 years in particular. It's an important time to have been involved. And so, like others have said, I've been very, very happy to be involved and very honored by that. And the other thing is, speaking about teaching, it's my own learning that's occurred. And that's just been such a wonderful opportunity. I don't know where else I would have gotten that. So it's just been, you know, really nice to be working with all of you. And in particular, I've learned a lot about the economic growth. Just been so fantastic. It's just been exponential learning for me there. So, thank you.
Diane?
Well, I just want to say that a lot of times when people refer to the Minnesota model, as we've kind of been called, it's a mapping program that we separately fund. It's the grant program, and then it's the office, or a three-legged stool, but I really think it's a four-legged stool, because I think having the task force is a very important component, because there are things that the task force needs to set up, and then the office can execute. So there's some overlap in how it's originally set up, but some of the things you do best are the advocacy and the general idea thinking, and then what the office can do is the execution, and we respect that of each other, and I think it functions well, but I do think it is a four-legged stool for the Minnesota model: the mapping, the grants, the office, and a separate task force.
So, first of all, I mean, there are a number of things that stand out, but I think first and foremost is everyone around the table. It's been really great working with everyone. I've learned a lot from everyone, and it's been great getting to know everyone. So I just want to say thank you. You know, it's been interesting to see the task force evolve over the last 4 years. And everyone's, in the beginning, it's like blind, it's like a blind date. And everyone's trying to figure out how everyone else interacts with each other. And so I think the process has evolved to I think a great working relationship with everyone. You know, there've been some bumps along the way, but it's been terrific to see progress to the point we're at now. And I think the task force is kind of peaking at a good time here. So that's been kind of fun to see, and I think it's also reflective, where we can see the progress as a result in legislation and in the discussion of broadband as a key topic amongst legislators, and that wasn't the case just a number of years ago. I think that's testament to the way that the group works together, to the Office of Broadband Development, and the attention that everyone brings to the issue of broadband. And I have to also say that it's been great working with Diane and Dan. We've had weekly calls for the last 4.5 years. And so I think our last call was on Monday. So
I'm still kind of depressed about that. This is our last call.
So that's been great, and of course it's also been great working with Margaret. She's been a great person, I think, to lead the task force, and it's been great working with her in that role.
It got so close. I had to move John's office next to my office, so I had to walk over it all the time. So that's good. Well, first of all, thank you to all of you, and I'll say more about that towards the end. But when I think back, blind date's a really good way to describe this, because I remember exactly where I was when I got the phone call 7 years ago to whether I'd consider chairing this task force. And I think blind date's important because it felt like I was going on a blind date. I mean, I've never served a day on the Commerce Committee in the House. I mean, obviously being Speaker, you know a lot about narrow, and sort of the depth of areas that you don't know is narrow or shallow, but you know something about it. And leading the High Tech Association, I mean, that was, I think, where the call came from. And so, I've worked with 4 different commissioners over that time: Commissioner Rothman at Commerce, Commissioner Phillips at Deed, Commissioner Clark-Steven at Deed, and Commissioner Hardy at Deed. And I think that that is really intriguing right there. Those of you who now got to know me well know that I don't take on something and want to just sit around. I mean, that was one of my things. I was sort of like, hey, you know, yeah, I'm willing to be up for this. I'm going to learn a lot. I knew I was going to learn a lot, but I'm not interested in going on an errand for the governor that just produces a report and doesn't have anything happen. And it was really the ARA funding that spurred the idea and kind of sparked the idea of having the Office of Broadband as well as the idea behind a grant program. Because if you remember back 7 years ago, the ARA dollars were flowing into the state, getting going. Part of our charge was we made a role for ourselves. We followed and mapped all that ARA funding for the legislature, and I thought that was really important actually as a way for us to jump off into this other area and be able. And the other thing that I saw right away is if we didn't have a home and state government that was more sort of a real place, we weren't going to be able to accomplish our work. And so we're sort of a split entity between Commerce and Deed, that we really needed that Office of Broadband home. We as volunteers coming together once a month, we can do a lot, but we can't do everything. And we really needed there to be that particular home. So creating a role for ourselves, being able to create action around that role, becoming experts, seen as experts, each of you collectively on the task force was really important. Your attendance is remarkable. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I don't know many task force that continue to get this good of attendance for 7 years over that period of time. And they're zero.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we fed you lunch, right? That was kind of the deal. Yeah, food. We worked for food. It was good. And there were bumps along the way. The funny part is the biggest bumps along the way were sometimes within how much a priority this was going to be for the administration at times. And so I think that, purposefully leveraging moments where I could leverage those moments were important to getting this to go forward and to move forward. So I really appreciate every single one of you. You have gifts and expertise that you bring to this that I really admire and has made it better because we all sit at this table together. And I just really hope, I will not be applying to be on the task force in the future. I just want to tell you that. So I know there's going to be a change. I think it's really, really important to continue this work forward. I think, everything has its time and season, and for me, 7 years has been a really wonderful experience. And I just hope that some of you will continue on in this work to bring continuity to it. It was important when we went from Task Force 1 in the dating term to Task Force 2 to have some overlap and continuity, but also have new voices. I'm so delighted that Hannah joined us, and it was so exciting. I mean, I just remember, being at least consulted about, who might join, and it's been wonderful and really great to do this together. To be able to go out and see some parts of the state and hear people's stories is also, I think back to our testifier who came up from Lake Crystal, our young student who wanted to tell us about how she wanted to be able to do her homework, I think right? Mm-hmm. On her, and just what that sparked for us, the connection. The message that I feel like is on a tape loop in my head of the woman calling Dana and Diane and telling them how wonderful and almost magical it is to be connected to the internet for her. And to still hear the struggles of people across the state when they don't have that connection. action and how frustrating it is. So there's still work to do, but I appreciate each and every one of you for the work that you've done. And the fact that we can look back on these products, these reports, and say we did something together has been really, really fun. And a great source of accomplishments. You know, sometimes people say, you know, what are the accomplishments? And I have these 4 or 5 things as Speaker of the House that I always talk about, but this is right behind that as one of the things I was most proud of my entire life, that we got started and going, and she has about the most perfect timing in the whole world, doesn't she? We were just finishing, Joanna, we were doing round robin of, the task force was talking about their experiences, and Diane and John talked about it, and we talked about how you are an important thread through this, being that you got to sit in John's seat at one time, and you know, here you are as chief of staff, and we wanted to make sure that we welcomed you today and had you here to mark this moment of the task force.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here. Happy to see some of you. I know we're serving on the task force way back when in 2012 when I had the opportunity to work for the High Tech Association. So I'm just here to really say thank you on behalf of the governor for all of your work over the last 8 years. I know he's been at this a long time, longer than that even. Some not quite as long, but we know broadband has been a really important economic development issue for the governor during his tenure, and the work that you all have done has really helped move the ball. Both the conversation at the Capitol, but also what's happening, you know, across our state in terms of expanding access to high-speed internet. Matt Swenson, who some of you know, sent me with great statistics, as he always does, that only 57% of Minnesotans had access to high-speed internet in 2011, and now 91% do. And so there's been significant progress and significant improvement in that time. And both you helped facilitate the conversation that we were able to have at the Capitol and all across the state. Then Lieutenant Governor, now Senator Smith, spent a lot of time really advocating for increased investments and continues to do so as our senator, and she was able to do that in large part of the partnership that she was able to have with all of you and the stakeholders for Speaker. So the governor's very sorry he's not able to be here this morning. It's the forecast day. And so
Well, congratulations on that good news, though.
Yes. Another testament to his excellent work and stewardship of the state for the last 8 years. It's a really good way to cap his career as governor. And I hope that some of those resources will be able to be utilized for broadband investments in this upcoming session. The incoming administration will also prioritize this broadband and what it can do for the state. So fully anticipate that the work will carry on. So thank all of you, really, truly.
Well, thank you. Thanks for all your support and your work, and please thank the governor. I think to a person, talked about what a remarkable experience this has been. I'm most certain that there's going to be some people who, if the next governor has a task force, which I suspect they will, being able to have some continuation, all of that, and it's really, really important. So I know that we have some certificates that you helped us facilitate from the governor for everyone for service. So this would be a good time to, maybe we can put those to you. We can help Joanna, who's not here. So we'll sort really quick. It should be in alphabetical order. Okay, well, we're screwed, right? Leave it to us to make it more complicated than it needed to be. And I think this is my yes pile of who's present.
I'll apologize in advance for any names.
This is not.
This is the most awkward time to have to leave. And I apologize. How do I leave? Yes. So thank all of you. And I just want to echo, Senator Smith is so pleased to see how this has evolved, and we can't tell you how many times we hear that this model, that she's talking to other senators and other people in the state, and so you know, we hope to bring some administration to Minnesota, and I know every day if I need anything, all of you at the table are always there for me. So, and Senator Smith. So thank you all. If you need anything,
Thanks, Bree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, thank you.
Now, you guys, do you think we would want a photograph of each of these?
Well, let's do a photo together at the end, maybe with Joanna. That would be great.
Okay.
Hannah, one?
That's right, we have our name tags here, so that'll help.
Yeah, everyone's doing a good job. And since everybody, I think we got it, that everybody's in the room.
You know, you're gonna go back and forth every time.
Yeah. We should break the middle and let her go in the.
Shannon, hi. Yep. Thank you.
This is so sweet. Pleasant little surprise.
Back and forth and all around.
Really makes it
I don't
real.
get to get up and move around enough during the day.
The reports everywhere hasn't made it real.
Oh, you bad girl.
What was that? I feel like Ann Tracy should get a certificate for being a documenter.
Oh, thank you.
Yay, thanks Joanna.
To thank all of you for your leadership. It's with leaders like you around this table and across the state, that's how we have been able to make huge progress the last 8 years.
I know that will continue. So thanks.
Thanks for coming over, we appreciate it. Well, should we do a picture of all of us?
Yes, yes, yes.
Maybe we could